Live from Atlanta, Georgia, it's the Zach Ballinger Show, where we help you find your direction through passion and purpose. My name is Zach Ballinger. I'm your host. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We are streaming live via YouTube. So if you have any questions, make sure to pop them into the comment box. We'll get them to our guests. You guys can always email me, zach@zachballinger.com, before any show gets started, and we will make sure to get your questions answered. Dave, thank you so much for being a part of the show today.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks so much for having me on.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive into some of these questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a career standpoint, I started my career on Wall Street at the age of 19. So I worked at a firm, Goldman Sachs, when I was 19. And then I moved over to another firm called Jefferies and Company when they were very small. We had about 20 bankers and under 200 employees when I joined. And I stayed at Jefferies for my almost my entire career, for almost 25 years. And I went from what I call the janitor suite, the entry level, all the way to the managing director and co-head of a sector group. And after I retired from investment banking in my early 40s, I moved into entrepreneurship, and I started a variety of different companies here in Silicon Valley, where I'm based, in areas like technology, asset management, merchant banking, and media. And in the course of doing that as well, I also became an investor and joined several companies as a board member in the role of either vice chairman or lead investor and board member. And I've been really fortunate that several of those companies have reached that $1 billion or more escape velocity in terms of valuation. Some have gone public, some are very large private companies, but it's been a great ride so far. So I've had a long career as a Wall Street executive for about 25 years of my career, and then an investor and entrepreneur since I left Wall Street, and have been focused on more of my own endeavors and my own startups in the last 10 years.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We've got a lot of questions that our audience have come up with today. So I just want to dive into these. And I know you are starting on helping people with their careers. So I think this is right in line with the show. So the first question I have is, how do you manage doing a startup business for yourself while maintaining a healthy relationship with your day job?
So I think it's not easy, but it's amazing how much time you really have if you focus and you deprioritize some of the things that frankly may not be part of your day job and may not be part of your entrepreneurial journey or side hustle, if you will. For instance, one things that I notice from people that I've mentored and worked with is that when you add up the amount of time they spend watching Netflix, uh, hanging out, drinking, and commuting, which unfortunately is a fact of life for a lot of people. It's a substantial number of hours in the day. And so for me, one of the things that helped me, frankly, was that I was trained at the altar of investment banking and Wall Street, where you generally, particularly at the junior level, you're indoctrinated with this 24/7 type of work culture. And for me, up until really my early 40s, my work hours on a weekly basis would hover anywhere from 80 to 120 hours a week. And so that's a lot of hours. And so when I started to downcycle my career on Wall Street and upcycle my entrepreneurial journey, I actually didn't find the transition too hard because I'd always been someone that was looking to use, as much productive time as I could to advance things that were interesting to me. So I think one thing that I would just ask people to think about is to do somewhat of a personal audit on where do you spend your time, and are you actually spending time on the things that you really care about and want to pursue from a career or entrepreneurial standpoint, or do you actually spend a lot of time doing other things that maybe aren't necessarily advancing those those objectives? And that's okay. I'm not making any judgment, but if you are prioritizing, say, Netflix above your startup idea, then don't be disappointed if you don't have enough time to work on your startup idea. So I think first and foremost, that's one way. And then second, I've started a lot of companies. I've invested in a lot of companies. I've also mentored a lot of startup entrepreneurs. And what I will say is that think about starting a company a lot like having a baby or birthing something. Uh, I'm a dad, so obviously I didn't have to carry my boys inside a womb. But I think the analogy is quite similar in that don't try to launch your company or your concept prematurely. Really give it the time it needs to figure out whether it's a viable business, figure out whether it's a financeable business, figure out whether it's a business. It could frankly just be a side project. And I do think that if you go back to my first suggestion around prioritizing your time and making it a priority, I think you could develop actually a good amount of time in addition to your day job, whatever that is, to to really nurture and foster and incubate this idea before you have to go full bore and commit either full time or frankly another 40-hour job, if you will. You got your 40-hour a week job, your regular job, and you got your 40-hour a week startup. I think there's actually a little bit of an intermediary point where you can really spend quality time vetting that idea. So I'm not sure that it's all or nothing right out of the gate, but obviously once you have decided that, hey, look, I have a business here, I think it can raise money, I think it can make money, then you have to commit, because if you're only half in, then you're going to fail. But I do think there's a little bit of a grace period there where maybe as you're handing off the baton from your regular job to your startup, there is an interim period where you can actually spend the time to really hone the idea and not necessarily give up the day job right away or downcycle the day job right away.
Yeah, you always want to bring before you jump off to any business idea. I always tell people you always want to bring the boat close enough to the dock before you jump off. So, your day job might be paying the bills, food, clothing, shelter. So, a lot of people have to have that. So, getting back on that point, Dave, how would you answer that? Because I get this question a lot, like from professionals that I talk to around the United States. They say, I'm kind of slacking off on my day job, not really I don't really care about it anymore. I'm only putting in 50% of the effort, tinkering with my business during lunch or even during work hours. What would you say to that?
Well, I think there's theory and then there's reality. Okay, the theory is that um, you know I want to find the perfect job that I love, and it's something that gives me purpose. I like to reference a Japanese framework that I use to guide my life, which is the Ikigai framework, Ikigai framework. And it's actually quite simple. You ask yourself four questions. What are you passionate about? What are you good at? What does society value? And what will society pay for? Because society doesn't always pay for what they value,
Right.
as we know, unfortunately. And really, my lifelong mission, and I revisit these four questions on an annual basis for myself. Your lifelong mission is to try to find that area that overlaps all four. It's something you're passionate about, something that you're good at, something that society values, and something society will pay for. And I think that that's the theory and that's the nirvana. And I think that many people have achieved that, but a lot of people haven't. And I think that the reality is that not all of us are going to find that four-legged table, if you will. If you think of each of them as like a four legs of a table, not all of us are going to find that, particularly not throughout our entire lives. I certainly haven't. When I started my career, I really only had three of those legs, so it was a little bit of an unstable table, right? Which was on Wall Street when I was starting. Was I passionate about Wall Street from a work standpoint? Essentially making Excel spreadsheets and doing PowerPoint? Heck no, I wasn't passionate about that, but I was pretty darn good at it, and I know that society values it because somebody needs to help these companies go public and sell themselves, and then society's willing to pay for it. Bankers and Wall Street does get richly rewarded, and so for me, the initial part of my career was uh, kind of a three-legged table. And then as I got older and I took care of kind of the basic needs for myself and for my family, then as I got older and I started to have a family of my own, um, the the passion element of it really started to dwindle. It was more like, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to write a book. I want to do other things. Uh, and I have enough money now salted away that the passion for making money on Wall Street really, really started to decline. And I felt that I had enough evidence that I could be good as an entrepreneur that I felt like, okay, I could be probably pretty decent at this. And I know that society values entrepreneurs. And if you're successful with a company, obviously society rewards you through IPOs and through acquisitions. And so for me, that framework, if you will, kind of changed over time. And what I mentor my friends and people that I counsel, I always bring them back to those basic questions. And I ask them, where are you in that journey? And no judgment. You don't have to have a perfect four-legged table, but it's good to revisit that because there will be times where you feel like I'm stuck in a rut, I'm stuck in a job. That's okay. Many of us are, frankly. I've seen some shocking statistics about the number of Americans that are unhappy at their job. And I think it's,
70%.
yeah, it's massive, right? And I think it's partly because that table for some people is really out of whack. It may be a two-legged table, and that's not good. And so I think that you have to continue the journey to pursue and find that four-legged table for yourself. But I think you also have to grapple with the reality of things, which is not everybody's going to find that right away. And for some people, it's a lifelong mission, as it should be. And so don't be so hard on yourself, but definitely revisit it. Don't be in a position where you're not even asking yourself those four questions. You're not even reevaluating that. And you're just sitting there getting really depressed because you hate your job and you feel trapped. And maybe this is optimist in me. I really don't think anyone's trapped. I really think, on the whole, we are mobile and we can do what we want. And I think technology, frankly, has brought a lot of challenges to society. But I think technology has really opened up a lot more opportunities for people to do side hustles, to make money doing other things. Because I'll tell you an interesting analogy that has really resonated with me as an entrepreneur, the entrepreneurial side of me, which is many, many years ago when I was a banker, I had a client who was a very successful entrepreneur. He was, a millionaire when I was his banker. He ultimately became a billionaire starting other companies. And I told him one day I just got a deal done for him, very successful deal, and we were just shooting the breeze. And I told him, hey, one day I might want to be an entrepreneur. And he said to me, he said, look, Dave, if I have any advice for you, I've already started, he had started, I think, two or three companies at that point and all successful. He said, look, one thing you got to realize is that there really aren't any bad product companies. There's just bad distribution companies. And what he meant by that, which obviously is an oversimplification, but it's a really interesting way to think about it, is that in this world where we are all connected in some way or another, where your customer is theoretically only one click away, then you should be able to find, with the right marketing strategy, right distribution, you should be able to find someone that values that product. And so that's the challenge, getting good distribution, not so much making the perfect product. And so this is why you see companies that sell products that you or I probably think like, who the heck is going to buy that cat back scratcher or that, that tinfoil hat, right? Well, you know what? That company survives because it's figured out a way to find those 1 million people on this planet of almost 8 billion people that are willing to pay for that tinfoil hat. And so I go back to the idea of, even if you're stuck in a job that you don't really want to do, don't ever feel like you're out of options, because the world, particularly with technology, has opened up tremendously from a distribution standpoint. And if you search long enough and you explore long enough, I am a firm believer that you can find something ultimately that will satisfy those four key questions in the Ikigai framework. It might take a long time. It may take a lifetime. but don't settle. Don't wait, and don't just sit there and think like, oh man, I'm screwed, right? You're not. I think there is opportunity. You just have to hustle to go find it.
I'm chomping at the bit to chime in here because, um, first of all, I think the table analogy is great. I really like that. And let me say this: your table may have four legs, and it may change. And so your table, you could have it built. And that's what happened for me when I first got out of college. I really loved sales. I enjoyed it, but I got burnt out. I didn't like it anymore. So my table collapsed. So your table may collapse. You may find a job that you absolutely hate, but as you develop your strengths and your skills, your table may you may build another one. Another thing I would add too, Dave, you hit on it, but when people are stuck in their job and they're zombies, that's what I call them. Work life zombies. They get up, they do the 9 to 5, they, oh God, it's Monday, thank God it's Friday mentality. I think what I encourage my audience, my professionals, my students is to give it 100% every day. And it is a positive attitude that you come up with. Yeah, you may not like it, but what do you do? Can you build connections in your job? Can you network with others? Can you build out your LinkedIn profile? The more relationships you have, the better chances your business is going to succeed. So you never know by having a smile on your face, showing up, putting in your effort every day, where that could land you. Second of all, you're going to learn different skills. So if you only half rear it when you go to work and you don't put the time in, it really transcends this mindset. And I think it puts you up because you're like, oh God, I hate this job. I hate this job. Okay, it's lunchtime. Oh God, I got to get through this. Oh God, I got to get through this. And then you get home. Well, if you come to the attitude like, I'm going to serve a purpose, I'm going to help people, I'm going to network, I'm going to do something. This is only a temporary state of mind, only a temporary moment in time, but I'm going to give it my absolute best, build as many relationships as I can, learn as much as I can, do as much as I can. And to you, what you said, time task. So if you're finding yourself having a bad day, take that half hour, work on your passion project. What say you?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I've had the privilege of working with many of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world. Lots of founders and big tech internet companies. Companies like Google and Microsoft and others. And I will tell you, yes, there are definitely some very smart people out there. But what really separates them from other smart people is the effort and the hard work. It's really all about hard work because, look, the reality is the universe doesn't owe you anything. And nobody's going to give you a free lunch. And so you've got to work for whatever you want. And I'm not saying that we aren't born, some of us are born with big disadvantages. We absolutely are. And it's not a level playing field. And we're not all born equal. But you can either sit there and accept that, or you can realize, you know what? At least I'm better off than, someone else that is in a more challenged position, maybe lost the genetic lottery and got born in a war torn country where you're not even allowed to start a company. You're not even allowed to have a job. You're not even allowed to have a bank account. So I absolutely agree with you. A lot of it is effort. And I think those are sage words that people should follow.
It's life's perspective. I remember when I went to Germany, it changed my life. And they're like, "Well, you're probably sitting there. Why did a trip to Germany save your life? Because you had a great vacation." Well, we went and visited a concentration camp in Dachau, Auschwitz. Nobody left that camp after seeing the mass slaughter, the videos, the pictures. Those people never had a chance. And you never nobody got on that bus and said, "Man, I want to watch more Netflix tomorrow." They got on it saying, God, I've got an opportunity to seize the world. Now, it may not happen and fall in my lap, but man, life's short. And let me do something about it now. And so it's perspective on life. So I love that's what you say. I think me and you are so passionate about this. We could go on forever, but let me get to the next set of questions here. Um, how do you find alternative ways to work in a career field away from the old fashioned norm of 9 to 5?
Well, I think a big part of it is related to kind of bringing together a lot of what we just talked about. I think a lot of it relates to having a very curious mind and thinking about where is the rising tide of opportunity. So, what are the industries? What are the areas that appear to be in demand? Because usually, when the tide is rising, there's more opportunity, and there's more opportunity for people that might not have all of the requisite expertise in that area. Rising tide industries tend to be much more forgiving of beginners and neophytes. And so, I think first and foremost, I would have a very curious mind and investigate those things that you think are growing and growing rapidly. And one of the frameworks that I use to think about products that companies I start are going to develop is I think of things from kind of three key dimensions. One is the what I call the 50,000 foot McKinsey bird's eye view. So what do the smart people say about this industry or this opportunity? What are they saying about it online? What are they saying about in conferences? But are people that have the fancy MBA degrees and the big PhDs, are they saying this is a good market? This is a good area? And what are they saying? So that's one checkbox. The second one is much more on the pedestrian ground level. What are the customers or prospective customers actually doing? Like, are they actually engaging in this product or service? Or if I build a product or service that would be better, cheaper, faster than the existing model, would that essentially be drafting off of an existing slipstream of consumer activity? And the way you can vet that is you can do observation, but it's nothing like asking people as well. So, doing surveys or things of that nature. So the second thing that I look at is what are the customers actually going to do, or what are they doing? And the third one, kind of tongue in cheek, is the everyone has a Steve Jobs in them. Okay, so everyone, and I'm not talking about wearing black turtlenecks and New Balance sneakers. I'm saying that every one of us has a view on a product, right? And even if the product is viewed by the McKinsey smart guys as a stupid idea, even if the customers are saying, "Nah, I'll never buy this thing," right? There's still part of us that goes, "You know what? I really believe in this thing because I would buy it. I know that I would buy it. I would pay a lot of money for it." Right. So there's the Steve Jobs question, right? So when I ask myself those three questions, those three dimensions, that tends to help me think about where are the good zip codes to focus? Where are the good opportunities to hone in on? And then I would use that as my guidepost as I think about how do I build a career in that category? What are the skills that are necessary to be successful in that category? Or what kind of company could I build to service that? Those are the kind of things that I think about when I think about I've got an existing business or I have an existing job and I'm looking for opportunity elsewhere. Those are the three dimensions I look at, and they're not equally weighted, and they may change from time to time. And history has shown that there's great companies that probably fail on number one and number two, but the Steve Jobs in you just, gosh darn it, people are going to rent my sofa and live in my sofa with complete strangers. People are going to get in my car, even though they don't know me, and they're going to let me drive them from point A to point B, even though everyone thinks it's nuts, right? So I think those are kind of the ways I think about the answer to that question. I think of it much more around how do I invest my sweat equity? How do I invest my time and money into something the same way you would invest in a new company or a new idea? And I think it's the same framework in my view.
Yeah, great advice. I mean, the number of things that people have made money on, it kind of baffles me when you talk about that. And obviously, you were making references in case and people are out there listening to the audiences. Dave said you get into a stranger with a car to go to, he's talking about Uber or Lyft or these rideshare services, where you're talking about who's going to rent my sofa. You're talking about the VRBOs, the Airbnbs that people are making a lot of money on nowadays, where, 10, 20 years ago, they're thinking that's the most stupidest idea I've ever heard of. Nobody's going to live in my house and rent it and pay a price for it. But guess what? They do. So I appreciate you mentioning that, Dave. This has been so helpful. Where can people find you? I know you've got a book. Can you tell us where people? Let's say people are watching this and they're interested in following you, or they want to read about your book. Tell us about your book. How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so easiest way to get in touch with me is just go to my website. It's www.lucrative.com, Liu. So it's like my last name, lucrative, Crative. So it's a play on my name. Yeah, so I wrote this book called The Way of the Wall Street Warrior. And it's really a way for me to give back to the community. I've had a very successful career and I'm very happy with what I've been able to accomplish. And what I did was I essentially wrote down all the tactics that work for me to rise the corporate ladder that I didn't learn at uh, two of the top business schools that I went to. I didn't learn in any HR or leadership training courses. And frankly, I wish people had taught me when I was younger because it would have made my career a lot easier. And so this book actually came out of a labor of love where I started to write down all of these tactics for my two boys. And a couple friends of mine said, "Hey, you know what? This should be shared with the rest of the world because there's a lot of people that frankly are frustrated in their jobs. They feel undercompensated, they feel undertitled, and you talk a lot about these unwritten rules in the corporate setting to crack through and rise the corporate ladder. So I was convinced to write the book really to help people that feel underrepresented, who feel disadvantaged in any way. And then I pledged 100% of the net proceeds to charities that are important to me. So I wrapped this whole thing into a charitable project, and the book was published by Wiley on November 9th. So it's been out, just a little over a month now, and it's doing very well. The first 2 weeks we sold 10,000 copies, which is pretty
Wow.
good for a book, and it was in the top 10 Amazon bestseller in the business finance category. It was number one new release in economics and new release in business finance, and it also won a Porchlight book company bestseller. So the market seems to like what I have to say, and if people want to know more and want to get any more career advice, definitely check out my book. I wrote this book, so it'd be the kind of book I wish I had at Harvard. So it's got cartoons in it. It's got takeaways. Every chapter is very short, and so hopefully it makes for a very short read. And I went heavy on tactics. The very little on the theory side. I went very very heavy on like, okay, what do I do in a meeting? What do I do to get paid? What do I do to get promoted? Those are the kind of things that I go into quite gory detail in my book. So that would be my advice if anybody is looking for more input or more guidance on how to navigate their career.
And you're on social media as well, right?
I am. So you can go to my website and all my social media links are up on the top of my webpage. Generally, my handle is lucrative, except for on Instagram, someone is squatting on that name. So I have a little bit longer name on Instagram, but yes, you can find me on TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all of those.
Can you give your website one more time?
Yeah, it's www.lucrative, LIUCRATIVE.com.
Dave, thanks so much for your time. You didn't have to do this. I really appreciate you sharing with my audience. It's been very helpful. Hopefully, we can get this word out and spread the word of what me and you both seem pretty consistent on, which is finding something that you like to do in life and career wise. So, thanks so much for joining the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Zach, for having me on.
All right. Until next time, everybody, this is the Zach Ballin